Wicked might be coming to the Universal Studios theme parks. This is not a drill. Welcome to Teacup for One. My name is Matt and I have 2 degrees, and that is right, friends. According to the BBC, Wicked might be on the horizon for the brand new, just announced Universal UK project. But let's not get too excited by people like me embellishing this into more than it actually is. In case you missed it, Universal Destinations, on top of opening Epic Universe, just announced that they will be building a brand new theme park projected to open in 2031 in Bedfordshire, United Kingdom. There was one beautiful yet vague piece of concept art released and a pretty comprehensive website with all the officially available information. But that information kind of just boils down to it's too early to announce anything fun, or in their words, we recognize the tremendous excitement our theme parks and destinations bring. However, it is too early in the process to know the possibilities of featured attractions and experiences. More details about the project will be revealed over time and are subject to necessary planning consent approvals. But just because it's too early to announce anything fun doesn't mean it's too early to start up the rumor mill. I'm looking at you, BBC. Less than a week after that announcement was made, the BBC released a news article that claimed they had information from a source close to the Universal UK project, and this mysterious source apparently name drops some pretty exciting properties that are apparently in talks to be a big part of the park. There are your standard Universal properties being thrown around like Minions, Jurassic Park, Back to the Future, but then they mentioned stuff that I don't think has ever been in a theme park. Really exciting properties like Paddington, James Bond, Lord of the Rings. But when it came to Harry Potter, you know, the big sell with Universal theme parks, at least stateside, it sounded like that was going to be a no-go, probably because of some kind of non-compete or just the fact that the Harry Potter studio tour is like 45 minutes away, and also J.K. Rowling is a steaming pile of dog shit. Anyway, the Harry Potter conversation is actually how Wicked ended up being name-dropped, because the article touched on whether or not there would be a Wizarding World, and they said, the source told the BBC that watertight exclusivity contracts made it difficult to include Hogwarts in the plans, although it could be reconsidered alongside other brands such as Nintendo or Wicked if the park were to expand in the future. So, there it is. Wicked, mentioned exactly once as less than a hypothetical. You know, it is actually crazy. For a property that historically has a pretty bad track record when it comes to being integrated into theme parks, it seems to be something that we keep coming back to. People really, by people I mean me, people seem to really want Wizard of Oz incorporated into a theme park setting, even today. And it actually makes me wonder, is the future of Wizard of Oz as a franchise overall, not just theme park related, but is the future of Wizard of Oz completely tied up in Wicked? Because a full theme park land dedicated to MGM's Wizard of Oz film just opened up a few months ago, and like barely anyone is talking about it. But Elphaba and Glinda just show up as meet and greet characters in Universal Studios, and everyone on the internet is losing their minds about it. So, is Wicked the key to me actually getting a good Wizard of Oz theme park experience? Because if it is, I'm not mad about it. Although I am a little, not even a little, I am disappointed in how the MGM film has been handled in interactive and immersive experience. Just how it's been handled overall. But, I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm getting ahead of myself. With all of the Oz theme park talk that I have done on this channel in the past, there is one leader in the theme park industry that I have never discussed as a part of that conversation. But that changes today, because today we are discussing the past, the present, and the future of the Land of Oz in Universal Studios. But first, a quick word from our sponsor, me. The Teacup for One t-shirt T-shop is now available on Etsy, featuring parody shirts inspired by theme parks to theater, including this delightful Wizard of Oz inspired ampersand shirt. Brains and heart and courage and home. Click your heels together 3 times and use promo code TEACUP20 to save 20% on your order. Okay, now that that's out of the way, let's talk about Universal Studios' first foray into the Land of Oz. And no, it was not just a few months ago when they totally wickedified all of the parks to cross-promote the movie. We are going back, my friends, to 2006, Where are we going?
Universal Studios Japan!
Fun fact, Universal Studios Japan had a Land of Oz section for 5 whole years. And I'm just going to get the green elephant in the room out of the room right away. I'm going to address the green elephant in the room. If USJ, Universal Studios Japan, had an entire Land of Oz section, why did it take me 3 Wizard of Oz theme park history dedicated videos to finally mention it? Honestly? Because at the time I was doing those other videos, I had no idea that this theme park land had ever existed. I did all of this Googling. I did my labor-intensive Wikipedia and Google researching. Nothing came up. The thing with Universal Studios Japan's Land of Oz is that it's kind of like that island in Pirates of the Caribbean. You have to know about it before you can find it. Like, no one really talks about Universal Studios Japan's Land of Oz outside of the fact that it was home to a condensed adaptation of Wicked, the Broadway musical. But the Wicked show was just one part of an entire Oz-themed land that most people, myself included, completely missed the memo on. So let's go back to the early 2000s and uncover what exactly people found at the end of Universal's first Yellow Brick Road. First things first, I think it's worth noting that USJ's Land of Oz was not an opening day attraction, but it didn't show up that far off from opening day. Universal Studios Japan opened in Osaka in March of 2001, and it was essentially a theme park that brought together the greatest hits of Universal Studios Hollywood and Universal Studios Florida. They had the E.T. ride, the Jurassic Park ride, the Back to the Future ride, the Jaws ride, as well as 2 classic Universal Studios theme park shows, the Animal Actors Show and the Wild 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 West Stunt Show. It's a lot of wilds. I don't even know if I got the number right. But what made these shows unique from their American counterparts is that they were given their very own land themed to the American Old West, which really seems to be a running theme when it comes to these theme parks opening overseas. Like, they really seem to lean into this, like, Old West theming in one way or another, because evidently that's what the rest of the world thinks when they think of America. Or at least they did. We don't need to get into what the rest of the world thinks of America now. Anyway, the Old West section of the park did not last long, and by the summer of 2006, Universal Studios Japan saw its first major expansion, or renovation, whichever word you want. And that entire corner of the park was replaced by the Land of Oz. And listen, this land was small, but mighty. I mean, not to shade other Oz-themed theme park lands that have just been pushed into the back corner of a park, Australia, but the theming here did so much with such little space. The bulk of Land of Oz's theming was inspired by Munchkinland, and the production design was this beautiful hybrid of the architecture seen in MGM's Munchkinland with the blue Munchkinland color palette as described in Baum's novel. Of course, as soon as you entered through the gates, you would step foot onto the Yellow Brick Road, which led to the land's centerpiece, the Emerald City Theater, which more than one person online has pointed out looked very Mary Blair inspired. You know, almost like Emerald City meets It's a Small World. And I love that. Shout out to Mary Blair, we love you. And on that note, what I love about this land is that the entire vibe, like all of the production design, feels so intentional. It feels so well thought out. This isn't quite at the level of detail that we're seeing in the current era of Universal with lands like, you know, Diagon Alley and literally all of Epic Universe, but it really looks like this was a step in that direction. Yes, this land has a simplicity to it, but there is also so much detail at play, like the textured brickwork on the Yellow Brick Road, the individual shading on the shingles of the buildings in Munchkinland. And it also looks like they took a page out of Disney's book and took sight lines into consideration so that you really couldn't see outside of the Land of Oz when you were in the Land of Oz. And for me, that elevates any theme park region tenfold. I still can't get over Jurassic Hogwarts. Oh, and another thing I want to draw attention to is the core 4, Dorothy, Scarecrow, Tin Man, and Lion, because if you're going to do an Oz theme park, it is a legal requirement that those 4 have a presence and be available for meet and greets. And they were, just not in the way that most people expected. Because this might be the opportune time to remind everyone of a very important piece of information to consider for the rest of this video. The MGM Wizard of Oz film is currently owned by Warner Brothers. So anyone creating something that takes place in the Land of Oz, anyone making something Aussie who is not Warner Brothers or does not give Warner Brothers a lot of money, they can't get too close to the Judy Garland version of the Land of Oz. Hence, why Universal Studios Japan's core 4 characters had to be totally original designs. And you know what? I love the designs that they came up with. Dorothy is rocking the classic blue gingham dress with the biblically accurate silver slippers. Tin Man and Scarecrow look very similar to the Denslow illustrations, and the lion. Listen, I love seeing the lion as an actual cat, as an actual big cat with anxiety. You know, if I'm getting anything other than humanoid Bert Lahr, I do not want a humanoid cowardly lion. Give me an actual lion. Looking at these 4, overall, they just look so familiar. And yes, they clearly draw some inspiration from the MGM film, as much as legally possible, while still having this really cool vibe that's like kawaii meets Denslow influence. In addition to having a statue of the 4 classic characters that you could take pictures with anytime, they were also available for meet and greets along the Yellow Brick Road. Tin Man and Lion were in those mascot-style character outfits, whereas Dorothy was a face character, and Scarecrow is an interesting one, because in most of the videos and photos that you're going to find, he was a face character, but I did find people writing online about how when they went to the park, I think earlier on, he was a mascot-style character. So it makes you wonder, why would they make that change? I do have a theory. I think it was to match the Scarecrow as he appeared in one of the stage shows, but not Wicked. Land of Oz had 2 stage shows because, remember, this was taking over the space that had originally been built for the Wild West Stunt Show as well as the Animal Actor Show. The space for the Wild West Stunt Show eventually became the theater where Wicked performed. We'll get there in a little bit. But they kept the Animal Actor Show. They just Ozified it. Toto and Friends was still an animal actor style show, but reimagined with an Oz twist. Hosted by Dorothy and starring some of Oz's most talented animal citizens. Parrots would soar over the audience, goats were hand-fed like honored guests, and a jump rope champion dog completely stole the spotlight. Now, this wasn't a retelling of the classic Wizard of Oz story. It was more like an animal talent show happening in the heart of Munchkinland, complete with a surprise letter from the mayor of Munchkinland, and there was a skunk gag. That said, what stands out to me looking at this old footage is how elaborate this set is for such a cute, simple show. Like, the scope, the scale, and detail here is outstanding. And that was a through line for the entire land. It was designed beautifully. There was only one proper ride. It was a merry-go-round, which, yes, sounds boring, but I'm not mad at it because this merry-go-round was gorgeous. It featured various animals and characters from Oz with winged monkey carvings adorning the canopy, and it looked stunning when it was lit up at night. And of course, there was the main attraction, Wicked. Boom, ba, 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 ba. I can't use the actual audio track, so just imagine in your head that that's the underscore right now. This was the first international production of Wicked, and it ran from 2006 through to 2011. The show utilized a mix of Japanese and English language, and it featured an almost entirely Japanese cast, with the exception of Elphaba, who was typically played by a foreign performer. Now, it is wild to think that the first international production of Wicked was a reworked version that served as theme park entertainment. That would be like going to Animal Kingdom, and instead of Festival of the Lion King, which I maintain is the best show on property at Walt Disney World. But imagine if instead of Festival of the Lion King, you were treated to a condensed version of Julie Taymor's Lion King from Broadway. Like, just casually thrown in, with Animal Kingdom admission. Outside of the sheer cool factor of having Wicked in a theme park, what's really unique about this production is that it was heavily revised in order to fit a 30-minute runtime. And when I say heavily revised, I mean they cut out major characters like Madame Morrible, Dr. Dillamond, Bach, Nesseros, Fiyero! They cut out Fiyero too. And let's just call a spade. The next 1 to 3 minutes is just going to be the part of the video that I cut into a short reel talk, so bear with me for the tonal change you're about to see. Just hold on. Okay, I'm ready. Did you know that the first international production of Wicked was only a half-hour long and cut out key characters like Madame Morrible, Dr. Dillamond, Bach, Nessaros, and Fiyero? I know what you're thinking. How would that even work? Well, it was a theme park adaptation produced for Universal Studios Japan, and bite-sized Wicked was actually kind of perfect. It retained most of the best songs while crafting a simpler narrative that got right to the heart of the story in 30 minutes or less.
If only pizza could be that fast, am I right?
The production opened with a bang, and after those iconic opening chords of No One Mourns the Wicked, we do not get No One Mourns the Wicked. We jump straight into the magic and majesty of the Emerald City with One Short Day in the Emerald City, and we are introduced to Glinda and Elphaba, who are exploring the city on their way to meet the wizard. They enter the throne room, they see the scary wizard head, then they discover that it's a man. And then the wizard has this expository moment where he absolutely shatters the fourth wall and talks directly to the audience and tells the audience that one of these two girls is destined to become the Wicked Witch of the West and the other one is destined to become Glinda the Good. He puts that fourth wall back up and turns to the girls and asks them, how did you two become friends? And then we get a flashback to dear old Shiz. Everyone bullies Elphaba because she's green. That's when we get, what is this feeling so sudden and new? Then Elphaba displays magic and she finds out that because she's magical, she might get a chance to meet the wizard. That's when we get the wizard and I. Glinda grows to respect Elphaba. Elphaba invites Glinda to the Emerald City, and in return, Glinda agrees to teach Elphaba how to be popular. Then we're back in the present. The wizard sings Sentimental Man because, of course, that's the song you're going to keep over Dancing Through Life. And then it's tale as old as time, you know. He shows Elphaba the Grimoire. Elphaba makes a flying monkey. She realizes the wizard is a fraud, and she decides to fight against him. But then it gets interesting, because then we get the classic Defying Gravity scene, but it is mashed up with For Good, giving us this grand finale to the show that's equal parts empowering and heartbreaking. So Defying Gravity starts business as usual, but then when it gets to I hope you're happy in the end, I hope you're happy, my friend, it transitions into For Good. And then they sing For Good, and then the button on the show is that big climactic part of Defying Gravity when Elphaba flies and she does her battle cry, and it is so powerful. And this kind of seamlessly sets us up for the Wizard of Oz that we are all familiar with. Elphaba has been branded as Wicked. Glinda is destined to become Glinda the Good, and we know because they sang For Good that they're never going to see each other again. So I'm curious, what do you think about this alternate ending to Wicked? Do you prefer it over the original? I personally don't, but only because this version of Wicked, in the interest of time, cuts out pretty well all of Glinda's character arc. Now, as a standalone, I think this serves as a beautiful adaptation of Wicked, which is more powerful in some ways because we get that final goodbye between Glinda and Elphaba just moments before Elfie descends into the western sky and embraces the title of the Wicked Witch of the West. And we end with Defying Gravity, which is such a banger. Not to mention the fact that in this version, you can just assume that Elphaba does actually die. Anyway, Universal Studios Japan's Land of Oz operated through to 2011 when it was eventually closed to make way for Universal Wonderland, which is what still occupies that space today. So it's an IP-based land that has sections dedicated to Hello Kitty, Snoopy, and Sesame Street. I wasn't able to find information on why Universal officially decided to close down their Land of Oz, but in reading some of the reviews from folks who were lucky enough to experience this in person and didn't realize how good they had... In reading reviews online of people who experienced Universal's Land of Oz, I kept on seeing this recurring theme where people were a little disappointed that they were going in and not getting the picture of Oz that they expected, the version they were familiar with, which of course would be the 1939 MGM film. And listen, I get it, because as magical as this Land of Oz seemed to be, it wasn't based in any recognizable IP. It was just based on the book. So parkgoers had absolutely no frame of reference for this version of Oz. So of course it makes sense that the portion of the park that was meant to be dedicated to families went on to become something that was, you know, still dedicated to families but populated with recognizable, lovable characters. Because, I mean, who's gonna say no to meeting Abby Cadabby? Not me. That was really creepy. Who's gonna say no to meeting Abby Cadabby? Not me. The big takeaway here is that until very recently, people only wanted to see one version of the Land of Oz in some kind of theme park immersive experience. And that, of course, is 1939's MGM's Judy Garland's Wizard of Oz. And it has almost happened a few times, between the short-lived attraction at the MGM Grand in Las Vegas, the great movie ride snippet, the theme park that almost opened in Kansas. Like, we've come close to that version of Oz being created in some kind of immersive themed experience, but it's never happened until recently. So I know that this video is focused on Universal Studios, but I would be remiss if I did not mention the latest happenings in Wizard of Oz related theme park news. We do finally have a land dedicated to MGM's vision of Oz, and it is in Warner Brothers Movie World in Queensland, Australia. So, as we all know, but you may need reminding, MGM's Wizard of Oz is currently owned by Warner Brothers. Warner Brothers, not a major player in the theme park industry like their competitor studios, Disney and Universal. So, when Warner Brothers Movie World announced that they were building the first theme park precinct dedicated to MGM's Oz, it was big news. Now, Warner Brothers admittedly doesn't actually own the park. Their name is on it. They don't own it. They license their properties to the park owners, but their names are on the gate. So anyway, I assumed that there would be no restrictions on using the property. I assumed that in building this land, the sky was the limit. I felt like the moment I had waited for had finally come, until the moment came. Now, I'll admit, when they released concept art, I wasn't that thrilled from the get-go, but I decided to reserve judgment for the land until the land opened. Well, it's open now. To be fair, I have not been there, but I have watched pretty well every walkthrough video that is available on YouTube, and I can comfortably say I'm pretty disappointed with it. And not necessarily because it's bad, more so because I think it's filled with so many missed opportunities, but also some of it is bad. You enter the land through a rainbow tunnel, which is giving Journey into the Imagination vibes circa 1995, and I love that. But once you make your way through the tunnel, you're met with your first view of the Emerald City courtyard, and I want to point out a few things here. First, the yellow brick road is clearly just painted cement, and you can see the seams, the expansion joints, which they made no effort to incorporate into the painted brickwork. And maybe you'll say, Matt, you're overanalyzing the floor. Wouldn't be the first time I've heard that, but listen, if you cannot get the yellow brick road right in a Wizard of Oz themed land, it is setting a bar for the rest of the experience. A bar that says immersion and attention to detail were not a priority when building this park. As you walk a little bit further into the precinct, you'll see these very flat walls that have been painted to look like Emerald City walls and the sky. And fair, maybe this is the space they had to work with, but I really think they could have done so much better. MGM's Emerald City is an Art Deco masterpiece, and yes, there are a lot of plain green walls in the film, but they're massive walls. The size is what lends itself to some kind of spectacle on screen. I think they could have painted these walls entirely green and added a few Art Deco inspired embellishments to really add to that immersive quality that I would really want walking into the Emerald City, not walking in and seeing a wall that's obviously a wall that's been painted to look like a sky. Again, it's just clear to me that immersion wasn't really a priority. Like, you can see speakers nailed into the sky in Munchkin Land. Now, credit where it's due. Speaking of Munchkin Land, credit where it is due. I do think the individual Munchkin Land houses are beautiful and probably the best architecture in the whole precinct. They look straight out of the film. However, that's hard to appreciate when you see a fire escape 15 feet away. One of the biggest criticisms of this land has actually been the sightlines, and yeah. Now let's talk about the Emerald City. I don't know what to make of this design. Admittedly, I do think it's impossible to replicate anything close to the Emerald City from the film in real life. I think part of the reason the Emerald City is so magical on film is because it's a structure that could not exist in real life. However, Emerald Cities have been built for theme parks and theme park-like attractions that have still captured that grandeur without having to replicate the exact design. The gold standard being the short-lived but gorgeous structure that was in the lobby of the MGM Grand in Las Vegas in the early 90s. They replaced the rounded towers with giant emeralds, so you still had a structure composed of various towers that looked and felt real and grand at the same time. Then, of course, there was the not Mary Blair-inspired Emerald City at Universal Studios Japan, which really embraced this flat, simple, cartoony aesthetic to great success. To my mind, the design at Movie World falls unsuccessfully between the two. It does have this cartoony aesthetic, but it isn't abstract enough for it to feel stylized or intentional. It just comes off as a little cheap. And there's not a ton to visually link this structure to the Emerald City from the film outside of maybe the shape of the windows and the rounded towers. But I think the biggest letdown for me as a park goer would be that the Emerald City isn't even an attraction. It's a glorified queue for 2 roller coasters. However, the queues are nothing to scoff at because this is going to sound like sarcasm, but it absolutely is not. I think the queues are the best part of this land. And when I say that this land feels like a massive missed opportunity, it's largely because the theming in the queues, to my mind, gives us a glimpse of what this entire land could have been, starting with the Wizard's Throne Room. This is the space where you can choose which coaster you want to ride, but honestly, I don't care about that because look at the production design in here. I think the lighting plays a huge role in the success of this space because it's not that far off from what we saw outside, but the added embellishment of the sconces and the directional lighting makes a world of difference to the atmosphere. But the main attraction here is the Wizard's head. I think the animation looks great and it truly brings the 1939 film into the 21st century. This is the missed opportunity because this gorgeous moment is just set dressing in a roller coaster lineup. But I see this and I just imagine how powerful and how cool it would have been if they could have used the exact same animation in a bigger space and allowed it to be its own mini interactive attraction. Kind of imagine like a Turtle Talk with Crush at Epcot, but an opportunity to interact with the wizard. And this could be its own mini show. Audience members could have a chance to talk to the CGI head back and forth, and then a curtain could be pulled back and the actor who is controlling the animation is revealed to be the wizard. It wouldn't be that far off from the experience that's already there, but that interactive quality would have elevated the park experience and the immersion into the world of Emerald City exponentially. And speaking of moments where the queue is better than the actual attractions, let's imagine we took the door towards one of the coasters, the Kansas Twister. I'll give my thoughts on the Kansas Twister ride in a moment. What I want to focus on is one part of the queue when you get to walk through Dorothy's house while it is in Twister mode. And this looks awesome. Pun intended. The production design in here is beautiful. The whole space is outfitted in sepia tones. You have the kinetic energy of the lighting fixtures moving on the ceiling. And I think the structure is built on a bit of a slant so that you're walking uphill. But the best part, seeing that Twister outside the windows. Seeing this part of the queue brings to mind the Twister experience that was supposed to be a part of that big budget Wonderful World of Oz theme park where you were in Dorothy's house and it was a motion simulator, kind of like Star Tours at Disney World, but Twister themed. This feels so close to that. It feels like such a tease having the most Wizard of Oz feeling part of the park just be part of the queue for a ride that frankly I find a little bit underwhelming. Woo! Okay, I said it. I said it.
You're a very bad man.
I am torn here. I am very torn between wanting to be nice and wanting to give my real opinion. Because let's be fair, it is obvious that Movie World is not working with a budget anywhere close to what Disney or Universal is working with. But when this park's Oz attractions were first announced, my first impression was that these were rides that had virtually nothing to do with the Wizard of Oz. They just felt like standard Six Flags style rides that were wearing a Wizard of Oz Halloween costume. And listen, the figurative Halloween costume can work, but if the theming is not present in every inch of the experience of these attractions, then they might as well not be a part of the Oz experience. You know, if I were in line for the Kansas Twister for 45 minutes and the bulk of that was outside in the sun with no theming, because once you leave Dorothy's house, you're literally just in an unthemed queue outside in the sun. I don't know, I would wonder where the Oz component came into play. So let's talk about the Kansas Twister. The Kansas Twister is a boomerang style coaster that is themed to Kansas. And I want to have a conversation with whoever thought it was a good idea to theme a sizable chunk of the Oz land to Kansas. The whole point of Wizard of Oz is that Kansas is boring. I mean, the whole point of the Wizard of Oz is technically that there's no place like home, and Dorothy has to learn that she wants to go home to Kansas. But if you're in an Oz theme park, the theme park should be Oz. You have a home to go to. We don't need a Kansas roller coaster. I just don't understand why this coaster wasn't themed to Emerald City. Paint the track green. When you start riding, have ha ha ha, ho ho ho, and a couple of tra-la-las, have that blasting in your ears through the ride vehicle, and just dress up the ride attendants in those Adrian-designed Oz graphic t-shirts. Wham, bam, there you go. Sir, it's a Emerald City coaster. Or, hear me out, it's a dueling coaster. There's two tracks that I think go simultaneously. Why don't we lean into that dual coaster thing and have it be Good Witch versus Bad Witch? Because we all know Wicked is all the rave right now. Lean into that. Have it be a Glinda versus Wicked Witch coaster. So many possibilities. Kansas being the least interesting. And if there was going to be a Kansas ride, let alone one called the Kansas Twister, why is there no spinning component? It's a twister. It's a twister. Again, credit where it's due. I think the other attraction in the Oz Precinct does a far better job at marrying the ride experience to a recognizable part of the Wizard of Oz. It's called Flight of the Wicked Witch, and it is themed to the flying monkeys. For all my qualms with Movie World's Oz, I love that this attraction exists. One of my absolute favorite pieces of concept art from the wonderful world of Oz was literally exactly this. An inverted coaster meant to make you feel like you were being carried away by the witch's army of winged monkeys. I think the ride vehicles for this attraction are on point and beautifully themed. The queue suffers from the same issues as Kansas Twister. I don't love the indoor portions of the queue because they feel a bit tacky, you know, more like glow-in-the-dark mini golf than multi-million-dollar theme park. Same for the loading zone. The atmosphere feels more traveling carnival than theme park, and the ride attendants, like, there's no reason they couldn't have dressed them up like little flying monkeys, but I'm not in charge. But I'm still thrilled that there is finally an inverted coaster experience themed to the winged monkeys. Overall, I just feel like this was a land of so many missed opportunities. It came so close, and it could have delivered a far more coherent Oz experience, even working with a limited budget. I do appreciate the attention to detail in every costume. Some of their merch is also on point. The Oz souvenir shop is mostly full of items that are technically exclusive to the park, but a lot of these items just feel like things that have been, slapped with the same small handful of licensable images that I've been seeing on like novelty license plates in beach gift shops for the past 30 years, with a few notable exceptions. The biggest notable exception being the Flying Monkey collection. They have brand new, adorable designs for the flying monkeys that show a level of creativity and innovation that I would have loved to see applied to all of the characters for exclusive merch for the park. But if we're talking about flying monkeys, my favorite item is the Flying Monkey backpack. It just, when you wear it, it looks like there's an adorable baby winged monkey who's like got his claws into you and he's trying to fly away. It's so cute. I actually looked into buying one. The shipping was $100, so no. But yeah, to bring it back, I've wanted an Oz theme park experience my whole life, and this just isn't doing it for me. The main reason that I've brought up the Oz Precinct at Movie World in Australia is because it's made me come to a pretty big realization, and that realization is that I think the Wizard of Oz film is becoming antiquated.
You're a very bad man.
To clarify, I don't think that the movie is antiquated. I think the 1939 film is a timeless classic that continues to stay relevant into the 21st century, but the thing is that it is not treated that way anymore. As much as I love the MGM film, Warner Brothers Movie World is glaring evidence that Warner Brothers is not that invested in keeping the brand alive. I feel like they see it as a licensing opportunity alone whose only value is in nostalgia, rather than finding ways to keep it relevant and exciting for a modern audience and for new generations. And this becomes even more apparent when you compare Movie World's Oz to Dark Universe in epic universe. On paper, both lands are a huge risk. They're investing a lot of money and prime real estate in a theme park into franchises that are almost 100 years old. And honestly, between the two of them, Wizard of Oz feels like the safer gamble. Wizard of Oz feels like the more obvious fit for a theme park. So why is Dark Universe such a runaway success and the Oz Precinct in movie world not? Because Dark Universe did something brilliant. Something that I initially didn't love, and I am happily here to eat my words. They reinvented the Universal monsters for the 21st century. Now yeah, again, I wasn't sold on the redesigns, but now, seeing it all in context, it is so clear. Dark Universe pays homage to the classic Universal monsters, but they reimagine them in a way that feels fresh, it feels thrilling, it feels immersive for today's audiences. When you think of the Universal monsters, you want there to be some kind of element of fear. But if you were to actually go back and watch those Universal monster movies, they're not that scary. They're really cool, but they're not that scary. Dark Universe has kept all of the best parts of those films. The gothic aesthetic, the iconic visuals like the burning windmill or the eerie European town square, but they gave all of it a 21st century edge. They made it cool and scary. Through elements like those electricity surges that go throughout the town, those incredible character interactions that were kind of made for the social media world that we're living in right now. Plus, the latest and greatest cutting edge technology in animatronics. Remember back when Disney's MGM Studios opened up and they had that cutting edge technology for the animatronic of the Wicked Witch of the West? All of that time and money and effort put into bringing a character from a 1930s movie to life, we're seeing that now, but applied to the Universal monsters. Dark Universe succeeds because it captures the spirit of those 1930s films while updating the experience to evoke the same feelings in us, the 21st century audiences, that those films evoked in audiences back in the day. Meanwhile, the Oz Precinct at Movie World leans entirely on nostalgia, and nostalgia alone is not enough to engage guests. Today, theme parks are built all around immersive experiences, and Oz is practically made for that kind of treatment, but the franchise just feels stuck. The rights holders aren't really developing it, but it also feels like they've been gatekeeping it from the competitors who, ironically, are the companies that know how to do theme park experiences right. For decades, there was only one version of Oz that the general public knew or cared about, which was the MGM film. They wanted the recognizable characters, they wanted the familiar songs, they wanted the whole package. And until recently, there was only that one movie that checked those boxes. But now, there's two. Through Wicked, for the first time, there is a highly commercialized, profitable alternative version of Oz that is well on its way to rivaling MGM's pop culture dominance. And even more importantly, Wicked is owned by Universal, one of the biggest theme park operators in the world. Universal has already started to introduce Wicked into their theme parks, and so far, it has been a home run every single time. Ranging from pop-ups to character meet and greets to some experiences that are basically already the Oz theme park of our dreams. Now, as is usually the case, the really good and coolest stuff has appeared in theme parks overseas, but the Universal parks stateside have been absolutely wickedified over the past few months. Specifically since last November, initially as a marketing scheme in advance of Wicked Part 1 releasing, but to the absolute joy of Oz fans everywhere. The Universal Studios park experiences were so much more than just an activation, advertising for an upcoming film. In Universal Orlando, an entire storefront near the entrance was totally overhauled for Wicked, the experience. The space was totally transformed to celebrate the film, with photo ops alongside costume and prop replicas from the film, and an entire shop dedicated to Wicked merch, including a slew of exclusive items, many of which leaned into the Shiz branding. Is Shiz the brand new Hogwarts? Yes. They also had green and pink themed foods, but the coolest thing, in my opinion, is that the Starbucks in Universal Studios, both Hollywood and Orlando, had exclusive Wicked Discovery mugs. There was one for Munchkinland, one for Shiz, and one for Emerald City, and you could only get them on property at the Starbucks at these theme parks, and I hate that, but I love that I hate that, because they developed unique, creative, exclusive merch that, like, I want to get my hands on, but I can't. And that's what makes it special. That's what makes it exciting for me as a consumer of all things Oz, outside of the fact that I don't have those mugs and I can't drink out of them. What I'm saying is, if you have those mugs available, I might buy one from you. Let me know. Whew! But the point is, this is how you do exclusive merch. Create something that is as special as the franchise. At the time of recording this video, the Wicked experience is still going strong in Universal Orlando, and it's my assumption, like I think it's pretty safe to bet that it will be there through to, at the very least, the end of the year, and they will probably do some kind of update or revamp in advance of Wicked for Good's release in November. The Wicked offerings at Universal Studios Hollywood were a little bit more low-key, but they did have the exclusive merchandise, and they also seemed to lean a little bit harder into the Wicked-themed food. When the film was first released, they transformed one of their dining locations, Hollywood and Dine, into an all-Wicked dining center with Oz-themed foods. Now, they were mostly regular theme park fare with fun Oz names, but there were a few items that had an Ozian aesthetic, and I would have ordered this disgusting looking flatbread that I think was like mayonnaise and corn, two of my least favorite foods, but they wrote Oz in shredded cheese. There's no way I wouldn't eat that. But more importantly, when we're discussing Universal Studios Hollywood in the scope of Wicked, this has been on every Oz fan's radar, because Universal just launched a brand new event, Universal Fan Fest Nights, where for the first time they have scheduled meet and greets with Glinda and Elphaba. Now, those characters did show up at the Wicked experience in Orlando when it first launched, but it was a surprise. This is the first time the witches are available as scheduled meet and greets, and I think it's so exciting to see that this has been programmed into a fan event like Universal Fan Fest Nights, because that's an indication to me that Universal is recognizing that there is a market and a desire for this property and for these characters. And the Elphaba and Glinda meet and greets don't just stop in the States, because the witches have returned to their original theme park home, Universal Studios Japan. Wicked had its theatrical release in Japan on March 19th, 2025, and so Universal Studios Japan celebrated with a limited time costume display, which ended in April, but Elphaba and Glinda meet and greets are currently being advertised on their website as an offering available through to the end of the year. But if we're talking about parks overseas, the crown jewel of Wicked offerings took place at Universal Studios Singapore. And let me brace you for this, because this, what I'm about to show you, was just a pop-up event. It's already over. It was there for just over a month, but it truly feels like everything that they did for this activation was just a few steps away from being like worthy of a permanent Wicked theme park land, like a Wicked theme park land of our dreams. For 1 month only, Universal Studios Singapore transformed the New York section of their theme park into an immersive experience in the Emerald City. So there was themed food and drinks, which, yes, is old news by now. We already saw that at the other Universal parks celebrating Wicked. But you know what we didn't see? Citizens of the Emerald City. Yes, in addition to having the legally required meet and greets with Elphaba and Glinda, who looked fantabulous, let's get that out of the way, they also had meet and greets with Emerald City citizens who just populated the streets as walk-around characters. There was a traveling flower vendor, there was a shoe shiner who would actually shine your shoes, and this brings me to what I think is one of the most awesome offerings, the Emerald City Beautification Salon. Listen, between the Wash and Brush Up Company and the salon briefly seen in Wicked, a makeover in the Emerald City is like a rite of passage, and it's one that they offered. You could get face painting, hairstyling, and or nail services for $30. You could pick between a Glinda-inspired look or an Elphaba-inspired look, or I think you could do some of the services a la carte. I can't get over how much I love this. Not because I would use the service, but because it is so well themed. And it is in fact so well themed that it took me a long time to realize that this was just essentially a glorified face painting station, which basically every theme park has some kind of face painting station. But the way that they layered this face painting station into the land really brings the Emerald City experience to life in a way that feels immersive and personalized. You know, I would almost go as far as to say it was the coolest thing they offered as part of this Wicked experience, except that's wrong, because the coolest thing they offered was this, the Wizard of Oz's head. I am awestruck by this. I won't even get into the inconsolable mess that I would be if I got to personally experience meeting the Wizard of Oz in this capacity. It would actually be like a lifelong dream. It would be like my version of those Star Wars fans who got to build a lightsaber or fly the Millennium Falcon. But that aside, let's just take a moment to appreciate how stunning the production design is here. I'm just going to say it. This is what Movie World's Emerald City should have looked like. This is just as simple. It is just a facade, but it has texture. It has Art Deco embellishments. It has lighting effects that somehow hold up in the middle of the day with the sun out. And it adds so much kinetic energy to what is, at the end of the day, just a wall. And then the theatricality of those double doors opening up and revealing a fully functional, presumably to-scale model of the wizard's mechanical head, which is also a puppet. Oh yeah, and I don't think I mentioned this. This was not just a photo op. This was a puppet, and I am fairly certain that it interacted with guests. You could talk to this thing in addition to getting a photo with it. I am flabbergasted. Especially because this was the shortest lived Wicked installation. It was just a pop-up, but at the same time, it might be the best Oz theme park experience in recent memory, if not ever. Like, it's almost rivaling MGM Grand in Las Vegas. And the reason that this pop-up excites me so much is because I almost feel like it's a look into what a permanent Wicked Land could look like. And it's made me wonder how much of these experiences have just been Universal testing the waters, figuring out experiences that could potentially find their way into a Wicked expansion in one of their parks. Now let's say, for the sake of argument, that a Wicked portal were to arrive in Epic Universe when that park inevitably gets an expansion. Can you imagine the potential? Obviously, the portal would be themed to a clock, and the clock of the Time Dragon would just kind of be hovering above, and it would just be there to, you know, make the people who've read the book feel smart, but also feel a little bit uncomfortable. It would be one of those, hey, do you know what actually happens inside that dragon? The saying on the portal would probably be, follow the road. You have to read it in Jeff Goldblum's wizard voice. And then, as soon as you step through the portal, you're on the yellow brick road. There are so many directions that a Land of Oz, Wicked's version, could take, but inevitably, I think it would be themed to the Emerald City, and it would just expand on what we saw at Universal Singapore. There could be a makeover experience akin to Bippity Boppity Boutique over at Magic Kingdom, or, if you will, a non-monster alternative to Darkmoor's monster makeup experience. There could be an interactive Meet the Wizard experience. Of course, there'd have to be meet and greet characters, and by the time Wicked for Good comes out, we'll have brand new, canon, recognizable versions of Dorothy, Scarecrow, Tin Man, and Cowardly Lion. So again, those four have to appear in an Oz theme park land. They'll be able to. And I suspect there would need to be one live entertainment offering and one thrill ride. The live entertainment could go in a few directions. I mean, there would be expectations since this would be an entire theme park land based on a Broadway musical, which, oh, if that happened, all my dreams would come true. But I don't think they would actually lean into the Wicked the musical side of it all. You know, it would run the risk of people not going to see the show on Broadway or on tour because they would think, I saw it at Universal Studios. So I think that's off the table. My mind goes to some kind of pseudo Magic Kingdom style castle show, like a show in front of the Emerald City. Basically what we saw in Wicked Part 1. One short day, but maybe expanded to have some more standalone songs. But I just think it would be pure spectacle, and the main song would be One Short Day. I mean, the arrangement they did for the movie already sounds like a song that belongs in a theme park. One short day, one short day, one short day in the Emerald City. As for the thrill ride, it could be anything. I would personally love to see an experience kind of like Escape from Gringotts, half coaster, half dark ride where you have a few show scenes. If I were designing the ride, I would love to see an inverted coaster like the one at the Oz Precinct in Australia, so you know, where you're suspended from above, either feeling like you're being carried by flying monkeys or like you're Elphaba, flying of your own accord, flying by tapping into the power within, and having that ride system take you through show scenes, potentially take you through Shiz, take you through the forest, and then have that all culminate in, you know, bursting through that big round window of the Emerald City while Defying Gravity is blasting in your ears. Oh, I should be a Universal creative. Hire me. Oh, so many possibilities. The only complication I could see is that Emerald City might aesthetically and vibe-wise be a little bit too similar to Wizarding Paris, and there is also something a little off-putting about having an entire theme park land built around this community in the film that's, you know, hinging on this concept of, hey everyone, we're in a cult, isn't it fun? But I think that would go over most people's heads. Suffice it to say, I want this to happen. I want this to happen so badly. And for the first time in a long time, I don't think I'm alone in that. One of the most exciting things about Wicked Fever is that people are really catching on to Oz. The Oz fandom is growing exponentially. And let's be honest, theme parks, they are a business. And so there needs to be a sense that they could make money for the people who are building them. For the first time in a long time, I think Oz is becoming profitable. It's just not the version of Oz that we all grew up with. And in some ways I think that's okay. Because Oz is so much more than just the MGM film. The MGM film is always going to hold a place in all of our hearts, especially mine. It will probably always be my personal favorite version of Oz. But the version of Oz as seen in the Wicked films is just as magical, and I think is kind of being primed for some kind of theme park experience. At least, I hope so. Anyway, friends, with that, this concludes yet another episode of Teacup for One. Now let me know in the comment section down below, if you were to design a theme park attraction based on Wicked, whether it was a live show or a ride, what would it be and why? Describe it for me in as much or as little detail as you want. And if you want to be the first to know when I release more videos talking about Wicked, Oz, Disney, Shakespeare, Cats, sometimes Funko Pops, make sure you subscribe to the channel if you haven't subscribed already. And if you haven't subscribed already, it is so easy. All you have to do is click on my face. Thanks for joining me today, everyone. My name is Matt and I have 2 degrees, and that's the Tea Cup for One. Go away.